Brother, David, you were talking earlier about keeping him motivated. Is one of the reasons? Is that why one of the reasons you're trying the 1,000, just to do something different?
Yes. Well, we've had the 1,000 meters in our mind for some couple of years. Last year we didn't fit into the schedule because everything was London-based.
Right.
In terms of getting him right for the Olympics. The year before we had the idea in 2011, but he picked up a niggling injury in May. And that put an end to basically any attempt we had. So we thought that the idea of 1,000 meters would maybe take a little bit of pressure off him in terms of being, when you're somebody who is noted for 800 meter running, then 1,000 you can run it in a little bit more relaxed fashion. Then you have also the idea that I think somebody like Wilson also holds the world record indoor for 1,000 meters, so that's gives him a little bit extra motivation as well. And I think that 400 as a kind of just a base for running is also a bit of motivation for him. So I think he's just kind of extending out a little bit from the 8 down to 4 up to 1,000.
Right, and I was looking actually at the stats, because people are like, what else can he accomplish? But Kip Keeler set his world record at age 26. He was actually close to 27. David's 24 now. When do you think his peak will be? Could it actually be, in 2016, he'll only be 27. Do you think he could that could be his peak, or when is it hard to say?
Yeah, well, age-wise, of course it doesn't always go by age.
Yeah.
It can vary a little bit from time to time, but from athlete to athlete. But I would say that, can a peak be confined to 1 year? Sometimes it's a near, maybe 3 or 4 years for most athletes. They're really at the top of their game, like even Wilson or Haile, or I'm sure Bolt also. They have a period of time. It's not confined to any 1 year, and every year they might have a different type of performance. David had 2 world records in a week in 2010, and then combining it all into one race in 2012. So it can come in different ways. So when it comes to 2000, from now on for David, you say, okay, in Rio, it'll be 27. Should you be at the peak of 800 meter running? It'll depend a little bit on how he manages himself. Along with myself, involvement, and James Templeton, his agent, how we manage him in the next. If he continues to run sparingly, which he has been doing. He only ran a few races before the Olympics last year, and then came out and pulled out the big one. This year he has run sparingly again. He's only his second 800 meters. So I think a lot depends also on how you manage yourself. About if he can peak again. Now, what do you call another peak again as well? Do you call it winning another Olympic gold? Do you talk about it winning another Olympic gold with a world record? So the peak the peak can move a little bit about what you mean by a peak. Maybe running last year, is it you would say offhand, it's very difficult to match what he did last year. It's certainly in one person's book that would be a peak, and that's it.
Right.
He might peak in another way, but certainly to match 2012, very difficult.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was lost about that race was the other people and how fast they run. You got this 19-year-old guy, Nigel Amos. Do you think if he comes up, some people might think, oh no, that's a threat, but do you think that actually might be good for David because it would give him someone to...
2012 showed us one thing, and this is what made the race great, as you said, that before that there was David and the rest. Now the fact that all 8 athletes had some personal achievement in that race, be it the world junior record, season best, national records, and everything. That's what made the race so fantastic. Like David pulled them all through various personal achievements, and I think people look back on that now and say also there are 3 or 4 very young 800 meter runners nipping on his heels. So he has to be careful, and he showed that by losing the last race, to a man. So he has to be careful. I mean, but that helps to keep him grounded. The fact he loses a race now and again, he doesn't carry the tag of being invincible, which I think is good. It keeps him on his toes. The day you think you're invincible, that's your biggest enemy.
All right. Well, good luck to you.
Don't feel, I should have done it here, no, just keep it there, leave it sit there. So there's that kind of psychology that goes on between us very often, and he said, yeah, he's quite comfortable with it. So things like that make, I think, David, to me, a special person to coach. I mean, other athletes have coached, as I said, you take a different approach. No two athletes are the same. And so you have to try and work with what you're being given. You have to try to get inside the athletes, their thinking, their personality, their character, and how far can you push them in training? How far can you push them in terms of pressure? You have to discover that over a period of time.
How long is the longest you've run, like a long run?
Oh yeah, no, 12 kilometers.
Okay, 12, okay.
Yeah, up to 12 kilometers.
Who are your coaching influences? Like when you started in 1976?
When I started, remember I was living in a little village in the Western Highlands of Kenya, far away from anybody.
Yeah.
I do remember at that time there were quite a number of Kenyan students from my school were on track scholarships to the United States. That was the era of track scholarships. And I used to be in touch with quite a few of the track coaches in the US, and they would send me coaching books to read about middle distance, long distance. Ted Banks, Bill Bergen from Iowa State. They would send me coaching books. That's where I learned it.
Okay.
But then, in the 1980s, I did various courses. Where learning techniques and things like that.
Do you like the new Pope?
That's a big change.
Now you get into the tough question.
I haven't time to think about popes. Maybe after Moscow.
Do you still enjoy coaching?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, in terms of, I still have a youth program. I have 40 youngsters, 20 boys, 20 girls. I always have that freshness of keeping myself grounded with youth. And it's great for David as well. He trains with them, and he gets back, and I'm sure he remembers where he was 8 and 9 years ago when he started. So, and he's great with the youth, and of course he's a great inspiration and role model to them now.
He told us how excited he was when you brought Wilson here to see him when he was in high school.
Yeah, when David was in high school, he had just started basically his running career, and he had a poster in his cubicle in the hostel of Wilson, world record at the moment, 141.11. And Wilson was his hero basically for 800 meter running. And Wilson still kept in touch with me, so whenever he'd come to Kenya, he'd come to my place to visit me. So I said, as a young man, I want you to see. So of course I took him to see David. He was absolutely thrilled to meet Wilson, and knew all about him and had studied his races, and I'm sure he became a great inspiration to David to realise that. But did he ever believe that one day he'd be his successor? I don't know.
Is it challenging as a coach? Is it almost overwhelming to keep challenging David after breakthrough after breakthrough? Is there ever a moment where we say, man, where do we go from here?
Yeah, that certainly after last year. I mean, 2012 for David was certainly a year that will never be forgotten. It doesn't matter what he does from here on in a sense. And of course, it crossed my mind as well, as it does all coaches. Where do you pull the motivation out of? Where do you go from here? World champion, Olympic champion, world athlete of the year, performance of the year. So, but I think, and I've mentioned this to you already, that David, great athletes have the capacity to rise above performance-oriented motivation. If I can use that kind of word, it's not just only performance. They might, for example, be looking at what can I give back to the sport. I'm a role model for young people. you know. So I still have a duty and responsibility to be an example, both as a person, as an athlete, as a character. So, and I think also the fact that many athletes who achieve such high standards are seen by the public as being kind of iconic status. So they're the life. Individuals are the lifeblood of a sport. You know, any sport, we look at the individuals within the sport rather than the sport as an organisation. You know, it's the individuals who keep the sport going. So I think people like David, like Usain Bolt, and I'm sure in other sports, Tiger Woods, and Michael Jordan, all the great sports people down through the years, they are the people who really attract young people into the sport. You know, not always necessarily the sport in itself, but so I think athletes like David who can think like that and realise that I still have a role to play, that's where they pull their motivation out of. Not necessarily even, we say, breaking another world record or winning another Olympic title. That's there, and that can be there. I mean, it's certainly a factor. But I think they can rise a little bit more. And you know, some people might say, "Oh, you make more money. It's financial also." Yes, it's a consideration, but I don't think any of these elite athletes are going to starve if they stop running.
If you were talking to a group of young coaches, what would you tell them is the key to being a good coach?
Learn to listen. Learn to be able to get down to the level of your athletes. Learn to know what each of these individuals, what's going on in their head, what are their dreams, what do they want to become, and work from within them, not from all the knowledge and experience and success you had in the past. Somehow you must put that away, you know, and begin with them. And while they grow as athletes, you grow as a coach with them. Grow together, rather than you being up there as in an iconic status and they looking up at you. Get down to their level and grow with them.